Hello, welcome to Podfic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Grossgasteiger. I read out loud fanfictions for you busy bees. Free of charge and no strings attached. Today I will continue reading the Silmarillion / The Lord of the Rings fic by Bloodwing Blackbird from Archive of Our Own called And Now Each Night I Count the Stars. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. Note, this fic is rated explicit. On with the show. And now each night I count the stars. Chapter 5. It was near sunset on the last day of March when they returned to the gentle valley of Imladris. Maklor led the way, feet finding the path eagerly, without thought, as if they believed he was returning to the comforts of home and not preparing himself to face what amounted to a trial. It stung that his own feet would betray him so. Halbarad walked behind him, a comfort, though Maklor would never tell him so, friend or no. And this evening, Halbarad was quiet, not that he had ever spoken overmuch. At least, not in Maklor's hearing. Perhaps he was wary. Or perhaps he had noticed Maklor's mood. He was steady, this Halbarad, and watchful, and if Maklor was not careful, he'd soon know far too much. At the top of the last ridge, Maklor paused and looked into the valley below. Halbarad came up beside him and stopped, staring down where the house of Elrond glinted like a jewel. It is a very fair house, is it not? And yet you don't seem pleased to see it. Would you be? That honest face flashed into a quick grin. Oh, some of us enjoy sleeping in a bed now and again. Still, I suppose a family reunion is a steep price for a room when one is in your position. Maklor drew himself upright and threw back his hood. A performance, perhaps, but he could still find the role within himself. Last scion of a proud but accursed line, only living son of Feanor. Perhaps Halbarad would see through it, for such was the price of friendship, that he'd burn before he let anyone else see him afraid. There was no need to hesitate further, so he strode away, purposeful and haughty, and he almost believed himself when he said that it was no concern of his whether or not Halbarad would follow. He did, of course. They were watched as they descended into the valley, and few of the eyes were friendly. News of his expected return had spread, no doubt. Elrond had never been good at keeping secrets, and Maklor expected that here, in his haven, he would see little need of it. Still, their escort kept its distance, and eyes were content to watch, for the house of Elrond prided itself on hospitality, even for old villains like Maglor. Before they were led away to their chambers, Halbarad stopped him. I wish you well, Blackbird. You were a tolerable companion after all. Fear not. I'll tell no one that you said so. Thank you for your discretion. He paused as if he might say more. Farewell. In the morning, Maklor arose early and spent an hour before dawn, watching the stars fade slowly from the sky, Erendil last of all. When its light no longer haunted his vision, he returned to the chambers that he had been given, and made himself ready. Clothes had been prepared for him, richer than any he had worn in several ages of the world. He pulled off his gloves, and felt the cloth, cool and smooth as it flowed between gnarled skin of his palms. He traced the embroidered device of 8-pointed stars at the collar of the outer tunic with his fingertips and frowned. He had wondered what role to play. A prince or penitent, and this finery, with the devices of a fallen house, seemed to provide an answer. The council wished to see the last son of Feanor, not whatever broken thing Maklor had since become. He hoped he could still find it in himself to play the part. The council had already assembled in the chamber when he arrived. Maklor had not meant to keep them waiting, but he supposed it was expected. In a great chair at the head of the table sat an old man in white, one of the wizards, no doubt, dark eyes that spoke of an appetite for power and a taste for cruelty, or perhaps that was simply the view from the prisoner's dock. Elrond sat beside him, and Maklor found it hard to look at him. The others were just as radiant, limbed in their virtue, eyes bright, and watching him. There was only one empty chair, at the far end of the table, so he did not need to wonder where he was supposed to sit. It was Elrond who spoke first. My old friends, I wish to welcome you to Imladris, and I thank you for undertaking the long journey. I am in need of your counsel, for this is a matter in which my own mind is not clear. The wizard spoke, his voice deep and resonant. Indeed, this is a matter that will challenge all of the wise, for whose lives among us have not been touched by the actions of the House of Fëanor. His gaze sought out Maglor's. Indeed, who would have thought that, in this time of turmoil, we should find ourselves plagued by this one, this little singer, least of that prideful house? Kana finve makalaure. Have you anything to say on your own behalf? Maglor had no interest in being baited for the amusement of these who thought themselves enlightened. You're Saruman the White, are you not? The wizard nodded. You're called Wise, I understand. A lore master of great renown. I am. At least he had wisdom enough not to preen at the words. I think that there is little more for me to say, then. The history of my family is well known. If I'm not terribly mistaken, I think there was a famous song of the tale. More than one, perhaps. He tapped his finger against his lips, as if thinking. In fact, I'm quite certain of it. Further down the table, another old man snorted, and then coughed as if clearing his throat. Saruman's mouth tightened, and Maglor looked at the other wizard. He had noticed him, of course, a bit shabbier, a bit grayer than the others, but his gaze was shrewd and bright and strangely familiar. Have we met before? Indeed, replied the wizard, although it was many a long age ago and far across the sea. Neither of us are as once were. He looked at his compatriots around the table. I don't suppose that any of us are at that. Except that you still refuse to speak plainly. This is Gandalf the Grey, who is called Mithrandir among the elves. He gestured around the table. For the others, I am sure you need no introductions. I do not. Círdan had grown a beard, and Galadriel more terrifying, but no, they were still unmistakably themselves. That noble, laughing face, that great mane of golden hair, though. Aren't you dead? Silence reigned for a moment. Glorfindel laughed. I could say the same of you, although, unless I'm very much mistaken, you are the one with questions to answer, not I. It was Círdan who spoke next. Your actions are well known, as you have said, and it may be that we know as much of the reasons for them as we are ever likely to understand. For myself, though, and for my people, many of whom died at your hand, I would ask you to give fuller account of yourself. Maglor bowed his head. It is hard to do so. I could say that a madness was on us, that the oath compelled us, so we had no true choice. That is what we told ourselves, certainly. Do you not now believe it? No. Maglor smiled then, but not for amusement, though there was a jest somewhere in the tale. I could not have cast it away, if that had been true. I tried to hold on to it, you know. All that we had fought for, what so many had died for, if I could simply set it down, then that would prove that it had all been for naught, that we were driven only by our own pride, our own lust, our own futile clutching, at all that we had lost. I held it, you see, and I watched my flesh sear until I could bear it no more, and then I passed it to my other hand rather than let it go. I knew then, as I know now, that what we did was evil, evil that we claimed was justice. We blamed our victims for our anger, for our fear. We slew those weaker than us, and we laughed as we did it. And then, when I finally had what we sought, it scorned me. The work of my father's hands saw what I had become, and still, I held on to it. I did not mean to send Silmaril to the depths alone. I would have drowned with it. Should have, perhaps. But I suppose I am a coward after all. All that pain, and for what? Galadriel's voice was a clamor of bells, the sharp ring of steel, and Maklar flinched beneath it. For nothing. Galadriel spoke again. Indeed, it is perhaps unfortunate that we are not more like you. It would be much simpler, much safer, if we were willing to bring about your end. I submit myself to your judgment. Well, said Glorfindel, with little appreciation for the moment, if we've agreed that murder is off the table, what fate shall we decree for the only living son of Feanor? He leaned back and stretched. It seems to me that our choices are simple. We may either send him across the sea to face the justice of the Valar, or we may pretend that nothing has changed and permit him to go on his own way, as he has until now. Elrond spoke. We do not know if those who dwell in the west would accept him. My ships will not bear him in any case, said Círdan. He looked at Maklar. It has been long, and any anger I felt for your house has faded. My people, though, do not all feel as I do. You would not be welcomed among the folk of the havens, and I would not tempt any of them to evil deeds by your presence. In any case, I'll not risk a ship and crew unless we have some surety that he will be allowed safe passage. Should we constrain him somehow? Saruman asked. Surely he has proven himself unworthy of trust. Have we not learned the lessons of Eregion? He has told us nothing of what he has done since the loss of the Silmarils. Do none of you think it strange that he has reappeared now, when our enemy has again begun to stir? Where was he before? Could he not have been an ally to us in our struggles against Sauron? Elrond spoke then. I too would know the answer to this. Have you truly spent all these years in your solitary mourning? Did you not think to lend your strength to our cause? Could not the might of the son of Feanor have turned the tide of a battle? I see that you bear weapons again. Is it only to use against your own? There have been many battles since Beleriand fell. Did none of them tempt you from your isolation? Maybe he had some pride left after all. I was there. Saruman laughed. The tellers of tales are oft liars. Listen not to his fancies. I would like to hear what he has to say, said Gandalf. And I, said Glorfindel. I was at Ost in Edhill when it fell. I saw the death of my brother's son, the last of my family. I saw him butchered and borne before the host of the enemy, and I saw their joy as we wept. When Númenor fell, and the world was broken, I stood on the shores and sang for the dead. I rode in the cavalry at Dagorlad, and was there during the long siege. I was at Gwathlo, I was in Cardolan. I have marched in the hosts of men, of elves, and when the battle is over, I have buried both. Why did you not make yourself known? What good would have come of it? Who would have believed that I did not seek power or the restoration of my house? My family has done little enough good in our time. Was not the greatest thing the heirs of Fëanor ever did for the world to die young? I did not wish it said that my greatest crime was that I did not have the wisdom to go with them. He had spoken too much. And what brings you forth now? It is as you have said. We sit on the eve of a great war, maybe the last that our people will have a part in. I have no gift of foresight, like some of you. My gift, such as it is, isn't looking back. And I have seen war enough that I know the scent of a coming battle. I have noticed the Dunedain stirring in the north, and I sought them out. Gandalf stirred at that. Then your meeting with the sons of Elrond was no accident. My meeting with the Dunedain was no accident. I did not expect the meeting to be so quickly reported to Imladris. This was short-sighted. Elrond spoke then. Well, you have given us much to discuss. You may await us in the Hall of Fire. I will see that you have brought refreshments and anything else you may require. He found his way to the hall easily enough, and, as Elrond said, he was brought wine and fruit when he asked for them. He also found a lute, left lonely in the corner of the room, and he took it up without thinking that he might give it some company, might play for a time to calm himself. But a song would not come, and no matter how he tuned the strings, the sound was discordant. A small sound stirred him, and he found himself watched again. "Oh, I'm sorry." The halfling dropped the sheaf of papers he was holding, and he scrambled to gather them. "The hall is usually empty, so I come here to write." He held up his papers as proof. "It is the intruder who should be asking forgiveness," Mugler replied, indicating himself. No, I'm a guest here as well." He straightened to his full height, such as it was. "I don't believe I have introduced myself. I'm Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo, son of Bungo of the Shire." He bowed a bit and approached. "I don't want to presume, but the rumors have spread even to me. You are Maglor the singer?" "That is hardly how most would refer to me these days." "Are all your folk so diplomatic?" Bilbo adopted a pensive air. "Well, most certainly not. Most of my folk will happily tell you that you're a fairy story." "Not believing in the world outside will not keep them safe from it." Bilbo looked a bit taken aback. Maglor supposed he had taken a somewhat sharper tone than he had intended. It would be a shame to drive off his only hope of distraction. He began again. "Are you a poet then, Mr. Baggins?" Bilbo's round cheeks went even rosier than before. Well, I'll feel a fool if I call myself that in front of the likes of you." "All poets are fools, Mr. Baggins." Bilbo seemed to find it quite funny. Well, then, yes, I suppose you could say I am." "May I see?" Bilbo smiled wildly, but his face fell as he glanced at the first page. "Well, it would be an honor, certainly, but I'm not sure if it is really the best of ideas." "No? It's just, you see, I've been, translating some of the old songs into the common tongue, you see, and, did I write this one?" "No, or I don't think so," said Bilbo, "but you're, in it." I will not interfere then." He turned to his feeble attempt at music as Bilbo worked quietly beside him. The council must have been hard at work, for Maglor was left with Bilbo. They took their luncheon together as Bilbo told a tale of his journey with the dwarves, seemingly pleased to have found so attentive an audience. Maglor, for his part, welcomed the distractions as the hours wore on. Afternoon was drawing on when Maglor was summoned back to the council chamber. "Well, I don't know if good luck is quite the right thing to say in this situation," said Bilbo as Maglor stood to follow the messenger, "but I wish you well." The light in the chamber had changed with the passage of the hours, now slanting yellow through the westerly windows and striking the table around which the wise were seated. Saruman seemed ill-pleased, and Maglor ventured to hope that this indicated a favorable outcome, though he did not know what that might mean. "Maglor, child of Feanor, would you hear the decision of the council?" He looked at his hands before him on the table. The sun filled his palms with light, warm on the scarred flesh. He nodded, unable to look away from the sight. "The council has heard your words, and finds you guilty of the crimes of which you are accused, and you yourself have offered no defense. However, the council has no appetite to spill your blood, and we do not at this time have the means to send you into the West. In time, if we receive surety of your passage, or if the decision of Círdan should change, then to the uttermost west shall you go, where you shall abide the judgment of the Valar." Elrond spoke. "Our next thought was to send you into exile, to bar you from all the lands where dwell our kin." "Little enough change," remarked Maglor. "Except," said Galadriel, "that your presence would be punished by death or imprisonment should you so trespass. Lord Elrond is more merciful." "Nay," said Elrond. "The Lady Galadriel says that I'm merciful, but the truth is that I'm perhaps less trusting. I fear for you to go so far afield, beyond the watch of our people. I fear that you should return to your isolation without hope of return, You will become vulnerable to the wiles of the enemy. For my part, I do not fear this, said Glorfindel, his bright face shining in the fading sunlight. Maglor despised him and his mercy. I believe that you have said of your doings, and think that the enemy would find it hard to deceive you. From all that I have seen and heard, I think that you wish for an end to your solitude, even though you may not wish to admit it. I think that this is why you have sought out the Dunedain and have agreed to come before us. Despite your reluctant words, I am not deceived into belief that your presence here is anything other than voluntary. Maglor experienced a moment of horror, in which he thought the golden flower would wink at him. Which is when I proposed an idea, said Gandalf. If Maglor's folk are unwilling to either have him among their people, or to cast him out entirely, perhaps the path of wisdom lies somewhere between. These, then, are the terms we have agreed upon. You shall not enter uninvited into any settlement of the elves, be it to the havens of Círdan, to the people of the Greenwood, to the folk of Lothlorien, or anywhere else they may have settled dwelling, except for the valley of Rivendell. Here Elrond has declared that you are to be welcomed at any time. I have spoken with your friend Halbarad of the Dunedain, and he tells me that you are welcome to travel with his people, should you wish it. Is that all? This sounds much like the existing conditions. Almost, agreed Gandalf with a smile too merry for the proceedings. You shall not simply leave and disappear again. You may travel as you wish and do as you please, but once a year, at midwinter, you must return here to Imladris and have speech with the lord of the place. Additionally, once a year, at midsummer, you shall be permitted entry to the city of the Galadrim. Blindfolded and under guard, said Galadriel. Of course, agreed Gandalf. Of course, Maglor echoed. Where you shall make a visit to Lady Galadriel and give her an accounting of your actions. Cousin, said Galadriel, I wish you to know that I am no more pleased about this than you may be. Please understand that this is not generosity that moves me to bring you near my abode, but fear of the things that may be wrought in you if you were unwatched. I fear that Elrond's judgment in this matter may be clouded by the love he once bore for you. I wish to have my eye upon you as well. What of the love you once bore me? He did not ask, for he knew that whatever friendship they had shared had frozen and shattered there on the ice in the days before the sun. There is but one more thing, said Saruman. The council may have a task for you from time to time. Since you are so eager to join the fight against Sauron, I expect you will make yourself available to us. Maglor inclined his head. And if I refuse any of these terms? Elrond sighed. We have no power to force you, nor would we wish to do so. We only ask that you honor these conditions. Saruman spoke again, deliberately, watching Maglor as he did so. An oath, he might swear. A great sound rose in Maglor's ears, like a roaring of the ocean or the weeping of the dead. He found that he could not move, even to draw breath. No, said Elrond, voice rising above the clamoring waves. We will not ask that of him. I will not ask that of anyone. Maglor remained still while the room emptied, neither speaking to, nor meeting the eyes of the council. Soon enough, only he and Elrond were left. You have become wise, he said. So they say, Elrond replied. What of you? What have you become, Maglor? I no longer know. Elrond nodded and left him. It was time for him to leave. The walls of the last homely house felt constricting, as if Elrond's disappointment were their very mortar. He packed his things, few as they were. He left behind the silken tunics with their lovely but accursed decorations, and donned his dark and road-worn garb. He closed the door softly behind himself and slipped down the hallway. There would be singing tonight, in honor of the guests. Old songs would fill the halls of the House of Elrond, but Maglor had no appetite for their hearing. He fled from the sound, his breath gasping sharp in his lungs. In the cool air of the valley he could breathe again, safe but ever watched beneath the stars. "What will you do now that you may go where you will?" It was the ranger, Halbarad, who sat upon the stairs as if he had been waiting. He asked the question kindly, almost as if he knew what it was to feel haunted, to feel imprisoned within walls no matter how many doors there might be, to know oneself cursed no matter how many fair words of forgiveness are said. When he turned to Maglor, though his eyes were sad like grass in the fog. "I do not know," said Maglor. "But you know that you cannot wait to live, not even for the morning." A breath of evening air stirred his ruddy hair, and if any smile were to soften his words, his beard hid. He looked away then. Maglor's hand moved, almost without thought, as if he would touch the man's shoulder, but he had noticed already the way that his own eyes always found their way to Halbarad. He had noticed, too, the way the ranger watched him in return. So instead, he only closed his hand, his fist tight around his scar, and answered, "Yes, I must go." Halbarad stood and faced Maglor. "Then I will delay you no longer. Travel well, my friend." Maglor bowed his head. "And you. Perhaps we will meet again." Halbarad smiled at that. "I shall watch for you." End of chapter 5. Stay tuned.